Hey, it's Ben. Welcome to the podcast. And in today's session, we're going to talk again about self-sabotage. I had a couple of messages saying that I mentioned that there was more than the 5 ways I mentioned in my previous training around like how people get in their own way. And I honestly want to start with sharing that this is something that crippled me throughout my career. It's where I just felt like I was so in my own way. And there's something that I want to share with you that is really going to help you wherever you are in your work, in your career, in your life, in your relationships, whether it's your fitness. The obstacles that you are trying to overcome are not out there, they're in here. Your biggest enemy is you. And when you come to terms with that, when you understand that at its core, that's when the real deep work begins. And this is something that I realized I was always trying to find solutions which were outside myself. I tried business masterminds, coaches, consultants, mentors, and then no matter how much of the strategic work that you do, there has to be a level where you work on yourself as well. And self-sabotage is a part of you which is stopping you from moving forwards. And the way Gay Hendricks talks about this in The Big Leap. So Gay Hendricks was one of the most famous coaches in the world, with a guy called Michael Dell, Dell Computers. Even guys at that level who have got some of the biggest thinking, effective brains in the world, self-sabotage. And this is the truth. The bigger the force that you have for growth, the more that you're going to be met with this destructive force that wants to keep you where you are. And so if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, there's a reason that if you're going for it, if you're putting yourself out there, that you're going to be a victim of some of these 9 symptoms. You're not going to be a victim of them. You definitely would have experienced some of these 9 things I'm going to go through. So I'm going to go through them each one. And what I definitely recommend doing is hanging around and looking at which one that you need to work on the most. Now, I teach people tools which help them deal with each specific symptom. So let's dive in. The first one is impulse, impulsive behavior, impulsive thought, impulsive. It's like a feeling that you absolutely cannot move forward in your life, in your day, in your work until you've satisfied a craving of vice. I spoke to many guys when I was working primarily just with men, and they would be sat at their laptop and they just had this overwhelming feeling that they needed to go and either watch pornography, go and eat, they needed to go and indulge in something and they actually couldn't even visibly see what their day looked like beyond doing that thing. It was all consuming. Now, what happens is, and this is the psychology behind this, is that what we feel is that we have this empty, unfulfilled part of us that can never really be filled up. And what we do is we dip into the outside world to fill that up. So it's like the more I eat, the more I need to eat. The more I indulge in scrolling, the more I need to scroll. If you think about this, like think about the last time you were scrolling, it didn't satisfy the need to scroll. It made it bigger. And this is what we do. We go about our life and we have these impulses and we give into short-term impulses, and it cannibalizes our future. Because what happens is it consumes our attention in the moment. So what happens is we're telling ourselves that if we don't have that thing, it's going to ultimately lead to death. There's a narrative within us that deprivation equals death. Depriving myself of doing that thing is going to make my life worse, when in fact, deprivation is the path to life. This is why it's such a good discipline to be able to work with these impulses and push them off into the future, like take the sting away. And actually got a tool called the reversal of desire. The Black Sun. The Black Sun tool, which I learned from Phil Stutz's group, where we actually turn our attention inside. And one of the things that I do when I'm experiencing an impulse, say that I've got an impulse to go and eat or go and drink something that's negative, or maybe it's to scroll or do something that was just inhibit my progress, I'll just focus inside and I'll say, I've got everything I need. Ben, right now I've got everything I need. And that's like one of the things that, we can go a mile deep on each one of these symptoms. But what I've taught myself over the last couple of years is just to turn my attention inside, just notice that big unfulfilled chasm within inside myself and say, do you know what? I've got everything I need. And that is just the start of being able to wage a war on impulse. What I do love about impulse is it goes under the radar. It's not one of those self-sabotaging habits that you would think is self-sabotage. You probably, until I've spoken about this now, it's probably gone under your radar. But look how many times that you sit to do important work and then you end up scrolling for half an hour. Your attention just gets fractured and you don't move forwards. So what happens is we want to just get really clear. And like part of what I do with clients is I help them label their self-sabotaging habits. That's one of the first things I do. And that's because we've got to name it to tame it, right? The second thing is a victim narrative. And a victim narrative is you'll hear a narrative that the world is conspiring against you, that the world isn't fair, that you have been personally singled out for a hard life. Whether that's the government, your parents, your lineage, your programming, your culture, your local area, Facebook algorithm, YouTube algorithm, whatever it is, you've got this narrative that you personally are having a harder time than you deserve. And what a victim narrative does is it totally disempowers you. It takes away your agency in the moment to move forward. So what you do is you blame, whine, complain, moan, do all the things that feel like it pacifies you and how unfair everything is, but you still don't move forwards. So a victim narrative is that you're caught up in drama. You're caught up in the drama, so you can't focus on moving forwards. Because and you might hear this, like you can get people to get so wrapped up in their own drama, they just don't move forwards for months, years, their whole life. And a big shift here is turning victim thinking into ownership, like really owning your state, owning your thoughts, owning your actions. And when clients do this, it's transformational. This is a big, big part of self-sabotage, is that you start to see self-sabotage as something that you are choosing versus something that is blocking you from the outside. Because a lot of people think that it's the external blocks which are actually getting in the way, but it's not. It's them. It's because they've got this victim narrative. And every time something doesn't go their way, it's like, oh, there it is. That's why this hasn't worked for me, because I'm doomed to failure. Yeah. So this is why it's really important to get really clear on when you're showing up as a victim. And after studying this work for, quite a long time now, I can see when my victim narrative starts to come up. Actually, tell a quick story. This morning, we had to enroll Effie in my oldest daughter in a school in Dubai, and it was quite an expensive fee just to be on the waiting list. And I dropped into victim and was like, oh, that's so expensive, then we might not even get the money back. And I was like, that's such a victim way to think about things. It's like the school is persecuting us. And it's like, I was like, Ben, this is the cost of doing business in Dubai. And it was just like, I reclaimed my narrative in that moment. So that's the next one. The next one is hopelessness. And this is the way this is encapsulated is confusing a knockback with a total knockout. It's you feel that when you get knocked back, you get a no, you get some rejection, something doesn't go well, it's the end. And it's what I would say is probably the most detrimental for so many people starting businesses. You self-sabotage in the way that you confuse iteration, where you have to keep getting up and doing things differently and getting back up, with failure, with absolute failure. And the only real failure, as Alex Benayan says, the only real failure is not trying. But what the way that you self-sabotage here is what this part is trying to do to you is it's trying to get you to stay down. It's trying to get you to not try. So what we've got to be able to do is we've got to re-energize ourselves. It's actually energy that we need when we've had a knockback, because it's tiring. Like I've been there, and probably you've been there too, is that you've had a knockback, you're emotionally exhausted, and that is when you need to pull all of that. I would say universal energy. I would never have said that 10 years ago. It's not just physical energy, it's universal spiritual energy. Say like, right, okay, I need every bit of energy I absolutely can muster right now to get back up and go again. And there's a tool called the Vortex, and it's a short 3-second tool where you just envisage a re-energizing experience in your body. And it gives you, honestly, it's crazy how much energy it gives you to move into the next challenge. Because when you get knocked back, it's hard. You do need energy to get back up. And that is how we get over hopelessness. So hopelessness is also confusing a knockback with a knockout in a field like dating. You go for one date and it doesn't go well, and you totally overcalibrate. I'm never going to go back dating again. So it shows up in many different ways. And if you think about this, there's a part of you personally, your psyche, your emotional well-being, that knows that having a partner is going to make you thrive. It's going to help you so much. But there's a self-sabotaging part that wants to keep you in that lonely place where you can't move forwards. You're not doing any good work in the world, because it's a much a simpler, safer, contracted life where you're not doing great things. Remember, let's go back to that first statement, that if you've got a big force for growth, you'll be met for that force for destruction. A great place for your self-sabotaging part to keep you is on the sofa, feeling sorry for yourself. Yes, it feels disgusting, it's horrible, it's lonely, it's boring, but I can tell you what you're not doing when you're feeling like that is moving forwards. Next one that will show up is a lack of energy that you will. So I experienced this the other week. I optimized my sales and my marketing for calls in my calendar. And I saw a day where I had loads of calls, and all of a sudden I started this self-sabotaging mindset. I was like, oh, I need to cancel a couple of them. Maybe I could just move some of them around. Maybe I'll push for next week. I noticed myself doing it, and I was like, this is self-sabotage. I've been working so hard to do this and have my day set up like this and have this many leads. Why am I now telling myself I need to move them all? And so what you might do is you start telling yourself you haven't got the energy to do the things that you know are good for you, whether that's going to the gym, whether that's having a hard conversation with your partner, whatever that may be. So a lack of energy shows up and it keeps you held back. And this is, in a micro moment, what happens is when you haven't got the energy, you choose comfort. And when you haven't got any energy, you choose comfort. And then that comfort, when you make comfortable decision after comfortable decision, funnily enough, you don't end up in comfort. You end up in anxiety, frustration, depression. Long term, you can end up in suicidal ideation. It really is that much of a chain, because you keep choosing these comfortable decisions. You turn around after weeks, you're like, why do I feel so low? And like on the flip side, you've got those people who've got energy. They choose the uncomfortable decision. They choose the hard thing. They choose to go to the gym. And then after 12 weeks, they're like, I feel great. And like, so go figure. That's how energy is a weapon of self-sabotage. The next one, procrastination. Procrastination is where we push off activities into the future. And we know by pushing things off into the future, we lower our ability to act on them. It's less likely I'm going to take action on the thing that I've pushed off into the future. And if it's something that's meaningful, it's going to make lots of change, a good way to stop me from taking action on that is to push it off into the future. I'll do it next week. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll get round to it. I'll schedule it for a time that I definitely won't be able to fit it all in. And then so when I get to my schedule and I'm telling myself to do that, I'm too busy, I'm too overwhelmed, I haven't got enough energy, I don't do it. So procrastination for me is where we push things off into the future, lower our ability to take action on them, and then we don't take action on them. And that's how we keep ourselves safe. Whereas what we want to be doing is what I call folding time, creating the future from the future and doing potent actions in the moment. This is about being effective. So the self-sabotaging part of you, the way it's going to stop you from moving forwards is to get all the great tasks that need to be done and push them off into the future. Next one is perfectionism. And perfectionism is a great weapon of self-sabotage. Here's why. Is because perfectionism sets a bar, and when you reach that bar, it raises the bar. It's a real deadly combination of not good enough, and when it is good enough, it's still not good enough. Because what we do is that we have that standard, and we said, well, if I had it with clients the other day, a client got their first sale. and they were upset that they didn't get the 5 that they actually wanted. And I was like, you got your first sale. And they didn't want to celebrate because they hadn't got their 5th. And this is like the perfectionist mindset, is that then you're in a place of the gap, as Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy talk about, is the gap. I'm not experiencing the dopamine hit, which tells me to go and do that again, because I'm looking at the gap, not the gain. And this client, first ever sale. And because it wasn't the 5th, they were miserable. They felt like they'd beaten themselves up. Their inner critic was going wild. Well, if I can do 1, I could have definitely done 5. It's like, this is your first ever sale. Let's celebrate. Let's actually enjoy the experience so your brain tells you to go and do it again. And I think this is why perfectionism is such a crippling self-sabotaging habit. It's seemingly like it's trying to look after you, being a perfectionist. Oh, I'm a perfectionist. It's almost a championed trait. I'm proud of being a perfectionist, but you're not actually a perfectionist. You're just an inhibitor of yourself. Like most people say, I'm a perfectionist. I was like, no, you're not a perfectionist. You're actually an inhibitor. You're actually just getting in your own way. There's no such thing as a perfectionist, because a perfectionist never really actually reaches perfection because they don't get enough goes to calibrate and get there. So an optimalist or a progressionalist is what we want to become. And so what we actually do is we see that a perfectionist has a high floor and an even higher ceiling. So they can never get to either levels. So they're constantly in this place where they're not being rewarded for their work. Really, really quite I think quite a toxic one, the old perfectionism. We got 3 more. So negative self-talk, self-berating. And this is I think it's a really, a one that you've probably experienced yourself. It's where you've got something that you need to do and you say to yourself, hey, hang on a second, I'm just going to go and have a chill on the sofa. And then you may be sat on the sofa, you start scrolling, giving into impulse. And an hour goes by and you haven't got enough time to do your work. And then this rush of negative self-talk comes in. You lazy piece of shit. I can't believe you've wasted all that time. You haven't done it. And you give yourself such a hard time. There's no way you're going to be in the state to go and do the thing that you're going to do in the first place. So negative self-talk is where there's this constant barrage of abusive, vile language towards yourself, thinking somehow it's going to motivate you. There's like, I've done an inner critic training. I think on the podcast there's an inner critic training. Is that the inner critic is going wild. You're giving yourself such a hard time. You think that there's going to be some level where you're going to move forwards, but you're not. You're stationary. You're not moving forwards. You feel horrendous. Your experience of whatever you were meant to do is terrible. So you don't go and do that thing. A very clever weapon of your self-sabotaging parts. Last 2. So holding on to negative emotion. The way this works is that the longer you can stay in a negative state, the less likely it is that you're going to move forward. So if I can stay angry, stay pissed off, stay rageful or aggressive or jealous, all those like lower, what I call like lower consciousness feelings. If I reside in those feelings, I might feel self-righteous and that the world hates me, that I can be in my victim narrative. But holding on to that way beyond the moment. Now, in Buddhism, there's talking about the throwing of the second dart, which is like pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And the first dart of the pain is thrown, but it's the suffering. The next dart is optional. How long am I going to suffer this feeling? And by all means, we need to validate how we feel. And sometimes we do need to feel how we feel. But what we don't want to let happen is that feeling to reside and to hang around and become something that we just hang around in and feel horrendous. When we can remove that feeling, that's when we can quickly get back into a state where we can move forward, where we can grow, where we can change. And the final one is, and this is something that was really insightful for me learning this one, which was sowing discord, breaking down perfectly good relationships. And I've noticed this in my own experience and experience of my friends and relatives, is that the more we are isolated and lonely and disconnected, we are going to be in a place where we will not move forwards. We're not going to move forwards if we have got no social support network, because it's more likely that we will confuse knockbacks with knockouts. Like sometimes I've been in groups and teams and I've had a knockback and I've been creating it as a knockout, and I've had someone say, hey, come on, you can do this, get back up. And it's a really clever part of your self-sabotaging mechanism. Is like, well, if I want you to stay still, not move forwards, not have resilience or anti-fragility, I'm going to cut off all of your social support network by giving you these really false narratives about these people that they want you to fail, that they don't want you to succeed, that they are plotting and scheming against you, that they don't care about you. And there's so many clients I've worked with, when we've actually gone through this, they've actually even said, like one client actually said to me, I think my clients are eating badly just to annoy me. And this is what she said. She came on the call. She said, oh my gosh, do you know what? I feel like this week has gone by. I've given my clients great plans and help and support, and it feels like they are eating badly just to piss me off. And I was like, can we just really analyze what you've just said there? You think that your clients are purposely not sticking to their plan just to piss you off. And we understood that this was really just a self-sabotaging part of her. She wasn't like serving as powerfully as she could be because she felt like they were working against her. And there's so many ways in this can show up, but the way this works is that it turns a lot of your relationships into drama-filled relationships. And it's really not the case. And sometimes I think that one of the best sayings I ever heard was from Brené Brown on this one. Is like, do you think people are doing the best with what they know? And when I find myself in situations, especially with family members, relatives, co-workers, colleagues, and I have even an inclination, I think that I'm sowing discord, I'm breaking down relationships through gossip or bad mouthing or talking ill of someone, I realize that's just self-sabotage. And here's the thing about being a leader and sowing discord. If you are sowing discord to connect with another, so just let me just clarify that in case you don't know what that means, because sowing discord is like, it's where you actually say bad things about someone. It's when you say bad things about someone. Sometimes people do this to connect with you. So they might badmouth the government or someone else in your friendship circle, feeling like they're getting closer to you. But the problem is, it actually subconsciously, you don't trust them as much when that happens. So the relationship actually breaks down. And I think that's a really interesting thing, especially when we look at it through the lens of self-sabotage, is that we start to just disconnect ourselves from the people that we love, care about most, and can help us the most when we need them the most. So they've been the 9 symptoms or strategies that your self-sabotaging mechanisms work against you. If you are experiencing self-sabotage, it's likely that you are, if you're a leader who is trying to do great things in the world. What I would strongly recommend doing is getting in touch with me. There'll be some links on this video or links on the podcast. And I've actually got a scorecard where you can assess which one of these might be the one that's taking you down the most, and I'll actually give you some stuff that can help you deal with that as well. Thank you so much for watching the video, listening to the podcast. If you can do me a huge favor, if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel where I'll be doing more. I'll be sharing more stuff on this kind of leadership topic, especially when it comes to self-sabotage and leadership. I love that dance because leaders are the most likely people to experience self-sabotage. And yeah, I'd love to have you on this journey with me. Take care and thanks for watching.